everyone, and welcome to the Dollaries, my little virtual doll diary where I log all of my customizations. I've only ever customized a couple of dolls, but I absolutely adore doll artists here on YouTube and wanted to track my progress as an OOAKer. But every time is a humbling experience. However it turns out in the end, it's gonna be a journey, so strap in. Anyways, back in December, I decided to buy the 6-pack Series 1 collection of Rainbow High dolls because I had recently started binging the entire series, and I was dying to have these dolls in my collection. I slowly started to notice that these dolls aren't nearly as cute as the ones in the show. At first, I figured I'd give them all a little makeover, as Rainbow High is notorious for having a few paint defects. But as I started repainting, I had a little bit of an epiphany, but more on that later. So, to start off on my quest to make the Rainbow High girlies a little more girly pop, I figured who better to start with than Ruby Anderson, the red doll. I actually kind of like her overall vibe, clothing, accessories, but she's definitely got some inner demons. And one of the things that really grinds my gears about these Series 1 dolls is the film of iridescent glitter that they put all over the face. So let's remove that. Anyways, off to the chess table. So first, I'm just removing her factory paint with acetone. And while I remove her paint, I feel like I should give you a little bit of a background check on Ruby. Like she's a criminal. She's the mixed media artist in the series, and I recall her saying something in the show to the effect of, I do mixed media, so basically I do a bit of everything. But that cannot be further from the truth, and now we've learned that Ruby is a pathological liar. She basically spray paints a lot of stuff, like shoes and skirts. And not to knock that artistic trade, but I can tell the writers wanted to make her edgy, but since Jade is technically the edgy one, they had to water Ruby down a bit, and now she's the tomboy who loves glitter. And the reason I'm telling you this is because originally I had just planned on recreating that same makeup look. That was literally what I was intending on doing. But some things happened, and I decided I wanted to go with something a little more queer. So, as we start this initial repaint, let me explain. As a 22-year-old lesbian, watching the Rainbow High series was just something I chose to do one day out of boredom, because I'd been collecting these dolls for a little while, and I figured I should at least look into the web series. But I got so enthralled in the lore of this show, and the multiple fan edits of all these character ships and speculation about many of the main characters being gay. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, or you've never watched the show, throughout the series there are multiple occasions of gay activity. Okay. Sit down, grab a snack, and I'll take you through this baby gay step by baby gay step. Without spoiling the show, even though it's a children's web series, so there's no M. Night Shyamalan twists or anything, but there's a girl in the show, and I don't want to name names, who gets kicked out of the school for sending photos of her project to an internship program, which is against the rules of Rainbow High, as they almost have like an intellectual property law in place, which states that sharing your creative ideas or school projects to anyone outside of school is grounds for expulsion. A little too dystopian for a high school, but okay. Needless to say, she does indeed get booted from Rainbow High, and Jade gets like insanely territorial about it. For example, the girls are all put into groups for like a final project at the beginning of the show that's just essentially a huge runway at end of semester, and since Mystery Girl has been axed, Jade goes full guard dog over protecting this girl's spot in the group, and she starts to argue with her team over letting a new girl in, which is not her call to make. The dean of Rainbow High made that decision, and she gets super sad for the majority of the episodes after this girl leaves. And I started to think I was crazy, seeing the way Jade would interact with this girl or have like somewhat flirty banter with her. And I thought, okay, you know what, maybe I'm projecting, but the show is also literally called Rainbow High, so I don't know. Anywho, segueing into why I wanted to make Ruby a little gay is because Ruby is also queer-coded. I mean, the backwards hat, the flannel, the red leather corset. Also, the most important fact being that Ruby and Jade kinda start flirting after Mystery Girl gets kicked from the group. I mean, it takes a while seeing as the love of Jade's life was ripped out from under her, but she comes around, and they're always together after Jade starts feeling better about the expulsion. And I think they even swapped clothes at one point. I mean, everyone in the group swapped clothes with each other because they were having a style swap party, but I'm pretty sure Ruby was wearing one of Jade's hats. Oh, and how could I forget? They're roommates! But the biggest reason for changing her design was that countless mistakes were made, and that's on me. I got so frustrated, and it dawned on me that uprooting the original design and going with a new one was a smarter bet. As I started their first face-up, I did remove her eyes before repainting her, and this got me into a bit of a pickle. If you are unfamiliar with the anatomical structure of a Rainbow High doll, they have what's called inset eyes, meaning that the eyes can actually be removed after waterboarding the doll in boiling water and applying brute strength. This was all fine and dandy until I used Mr. Super Clear to seal the face for the final time, put a Ziploc bag over her head so she didn't get wet, and submerged the doll in boiling water to pop her eyes back in. I'm gonna level with ya. I don't know why in the world I didn't think of this beforehand, but as you can probably guess, the eyes were gigantic, and trying to jam them back into the tiny little socket meant that I had to go frickin' nuts with pure finger strength. And not only did I melt her face off with the boiling water, as well as scratching all of her paint off. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I don't want to relive it, I lost the footage of this whole process. So that's a win in my book. I really messed her up, so I did have to completely wipe the face with acetone and start over. Unfortunately, after restarting and repainting the same face I had done previously, with the eyes already pre-popped and masking tape over them to avoid disaster, the pastels and the watercolor pencils started to bleed into the eyes. Again, I don't have footage of this, but in this case, I really wish I did, because I've never seen this happen before. And I've watched like every Rainbow High repaint on YouTube. Never heard of this happening, but when in Rome, I guess. I had to pop the eyes out very quickly, rip the backings off, and wipe down the inside of the eye with rubbing alcohol before it started to affect the paint and the sealant in the eye. I also had to be careful not to fully rub the factory paint off, or it would melt away within seconds. After the second attempt at customizing her face, I decided to put my internal rage to good use, and I used my X-Acto knife to give her a good old-fashioned lobotomy so that I could just insert her eyes through the back of her head when the repaint was done. This also meant scalping her. Sorry, girl boss. I then proceeded to repaint her again, and almost on cue, as if the universe had a personal vendetta against me and this project, like I'm doing something so ungodly that every karmic force in this world wanted to personally knock me down a peg. As I was finishing the fourth rendition of this doll, I sprayed her with Mr. Super Clear, only to realize that I had bought the wrong can and I was spraying her with glossy sealant instead of matte. This was my final straw. Look, I tried to cover it with matte sealant afterwards to fix my mistake, but it was no use, and so I wiped her down with acetone once more, and I could feel the life drain from my body. If you were curious, there's only so much acetone a vinyl doll head can take before it starts to crack and wither away, and there's only so much defeat a human being can take before it starts to affect your quality of life. I decided I was going to take a break from this project. After feeling creatively pistol whipped, I thought that maybe I should switch up the idea of her paint job, mostly because it had become so tiring, painting the same face over and over again just to get it absolutely bodied and demolished by my own actions. So I went back to the drawing board, and I started to put two and two together. How could I make this doll more interesting? How can I play into the fact that she is both sporty and glam? How can I make her more girly pop? And how could I actually feel passionate about this project again? And the answer was making her clear-coated for real this time. I'm making it canon. I rushed to my computer to do some deep dives on Ruby herself, as well as gay femme women in fashion and what clothing, makeup, and hair trends were popular. And by doing a deep dive, I mean that I went on Pinterest. Anyways, how could I make Ruby into the flaming homosexual that she... Oh my god. Flaming homosexual. Got it. It had been staring me in the face this entire time. Flames. Ruby's whole thing is flames. I'm not even joking. She spray paints flames onto everything in the show. That's literally how she got into Rainbow High. That's her concentration on the web series. We talked about this. That was her entire resume. It was for the final time that I decided to repaint Ruby. I had my references, and speaking of references, I want to give a huge thank you to Emerald Fairy on Instagram. She has some really amazing repaints, and especially Rainbow High repaints, that you should absolutely go check out. I don't think I would have gotten the inspiration to finish this doll if it wasn't for her, so thank you so much, and I'll leave a link to her Instagram in the description. Now that we're already like 10 minutes in, let's start the repaint, shall we? To start off, right before Catastrophe struck, I did decide to pierce her ears, so that's why she has the OG makeup in this clip. And I want to give a little disclaimer that you should be careful with sticking a needle in a flame. You could get burnt, you could get poked, and if you're a child, maybe don't do that. So I'm just taking a pretty thick sewing needle, and I'm heating it up with a lighter. After about 30 seconds, I just plunge the needle into her ear, swirl it around to make the opening bigger, and stick a jump ring right through the fresh piercing. And because there's nothing more queer than a DIY piercing, I gave her 3 cartilage piercings on her left ear and only added a lower hoop on her right ear later on. And now, onto the makeup! Right here, I've already applied the pastel blushing to the cheeks, the nose, the lips, and the ombre of the eyeshadow colors that we've already seen. Or at least I have, and I don't want to be reminded. So I'm just trying to shape the brows and get an overall feel of what I want to do differently this time, and I decided that I wanted to give her like a red, orange, yellow flame graphic liner with a little bit of black liner and maybe a thin line of gold glitter on top to pay homage to her original design. In essence, I wanted her to have some aspects of modern makeup, I suppose. And when I say modern makeup, I mean this fun new shift towards quirky graphic liners, really bold eyeshadow colors, glitter and pearls everywhere, etc., etc. It's really cool to see people start to experiment with makeup, and I think this is especially prevalent in the queer community, whether it's drag makeup or me in my bedroom at 1 a.m. painting daisies on my eyelids. I'm so happy that expressive makeup is becoming more popular as a whole. I feel like it's bringing a play aspect back into makeup, like when you used to sneak into your mom's makeup bag as a kid and smear mascara all over your eyebrows, because that's where it goes. As we continue, I'm just covering an existing line I previously made with a light brown pencil to mark out where I want her eyeliner to go, and I'm switching to a really dark brown color in order to darken it up. I've learned the hard way that it's best to go easy on the darker shades like black, because it's really easy for it to smudge and muddy up the face while you're working. I'm also adding a white line on top of the eyeliner as a way to tell myself, glitter go here, and I'm starting on the flame liner with a yellow pencil. You might notice that it seems I've skipped a couple of steps, as I completely forgot to film some parts of the face up. I was really in the zone at this point, and quite frankly, I wanted to finish the face up in one sitting, so there's a lot of parts I didn't film. If you're wondering why the doll goes from simple sketch lines to almost fully completed, that's why. Now I'm just attempting to add some red and orange to the space in between the two edges of both of the liners as a way to give the flames a little more body and make the flames look like pop art almost. I don't want them to be seamlessly ombreed and blended. I want it to be distinct lines of bright colors. Graphic, if you will. Wait, is that why they call it graphic liner? Hold on. Yes, that is literally the reference. Graphic as in stylized, bold. I thought it meant graphic as in like a graphic film, like it's violent, it's jarring, it's whoa. Nope, it's referencing the art style. Cool. Now I'm just adding some highlights to her eyebrows. I'm just flicking a white pencil over the ends of the brows to mimic the separation of hairs, and the way I like to do this is to almost sneak up on the highlight. Do it as fast as you can. Never let them know your next move. I'm then just building up the colors between the liners with a couple of layers going back and forth between pencils. And I didn't even need to do all that because I ended up switching the outermost line to red. As I was spraying the doll with sealant, the yellow was almost disappearing, and the only way I could really see it is if I didn't spray it with sealant. I don't trust myself enough to have an unsealed doll lying around, and since Ruby had already endured about 4 deaths and rebirths back to back, as I had created a Lazarus effect where she couldn't stay dead long enough to enjoy peace, but she also couldn't stay alive long enough to feel joy. I figured we'd both been through enough, and just decided to switch the color scheme. Now I'm just filling in the innermost space with orange and yellow pencils, and later switching to acrylic paint to brighten up the color, as I had hit that stage with my pencils where maximum opacity had been reached. It's starting to look real fire. I'm so sorry. It was at this point that I was ready for glitter. I'm taking a fine tip brush and I'm just applying a line of Elmer's glue all to that previously mentioned white line, which I then proceeded to pour glitter all over. I somehow forgot that there were 2 gaping holes in her head in which the glitter was just funneling in, so I had to knock her head against the table a couple of times to remove the glitter from her brain. Finishing up, I'm just using some triple thick to gloss her lips and the line of glitter we just put on, as spraying it with a matte sealant dulled the glittering effect, but gloss adds it right back. And I like to do this part as haphazardly as possible to really push my luck. And the face-up is finally complete. Oh my god, you don't even know how excited I was at this point. I thought she looked great, I accomplished my mission, I will never have to repaint another Ruby Anderson in my life. I've officially broken the cycle. So, because of how many times I had to wipe the face with acetone and then give her a little rinse, the hair has become nasty. It's really stringy and crunchy, and I didn't notice that it had been wet for like a week straight under the tightly wrapped saran wrap, and I'm honestly really lucky it didn't get mildewy or anything, but it definitely needed some TLC. A little trick that I actually picked up from the wig community is that you can soak artificial hair in fabric softener to liven it up and make it really soft. Normal conditioner works too, just not as well in my opinion, and since doll hair is artificial, or at least I'd hope it is, fabric softener treats it a lot more efficiently since it is technically plastic. I then left her to dry completely and was ready to pop the eyes back in. I just lined the eyes up in front, plopped some epoxy sculpt over them, being careful not to squish it into the actual eye socket openings, and let it dry completely. Now, 2 strange things happened as a result of this. The first thing that happened was that, as I had feared, the epoxy sculpt started to squish out of the sides of the eye socket, and it's not noticeable at all if you're looking at her from the front, but if you bend her downwards, you can kinda see the epoxy squishing out, but whatever. And the second thing is much worse. I believe it's because the eyes weren't really pushed all the way forwards, as there was a small plastic barrier from where the inner vinyl originally sat, but I accidentally gave her evil Mona Lisa eyes. No matter where you are or what angle you look at her from, she's always looking back at you. And I think I even manifested an evil inside of her, as for the rest of the time customizing her, something kept bumping my table, and it wasn't me. What was that? Now that her eyes are back in, we can move on to gluing her scalp back on. I first glued around the loose piece of scalp and smushed it back on the head to connect the 2 pieces, but just one line of glue isn't a strong enough bond, and I need some reassurance that we're not doing this again. So I'm further reinforcing the bond by just gluing around the seams of the scalp with some hot glue. At this point, I truly do think I lost my mind, as I decided to stick my finger straight in the hot glue. To be fair, I think the glue had cooled a little bit, but this was frightening to watch back as I had no recollection of ever doing this. After that, I gave her a quick little comb through and started to craft up an idea for her hairdo. As previously mentioned, I went on Pinterest to find the queerest and easiest haircut I could find. But I did remember a hair tutorial similar to the butterfly cut, where you take 3 ponytails, pull them straight up off your head, and cut an even amount of length from each, giving you some nice layering. So I decided to do that. After grabbing my actual hair cutting scissors and lobbing off a chunk of my knuckle, I started chopping. And don't worry, I did decide to give her some curtain bangs as well. Now that the hair is all done and styled, we can move on to accessories. First, I decided to paint her nails and slip some tiny jump rings onto her fingers to act as rings. And coincidentally, I could only put them on her thumbs and pinkies since the rest of her fingers were joined together. Which is, oh my god, kinda weird, considering that wearing rings on your thumb or pinky is typically considered a queer thing. MGA? I think it's kinda outdated now, but I'm literally recording this with a thumb ring on, so I'll be the judge of that. I also decided to spice up her hat a little bit and paint some yellow highlights inside of the already factory painted flames. And while I'm at it, might as well repaint her shoes too. So I hit the bottoms of her shoes with a little more red, as well as repainting the buckles gold and later painting the clear straps black. I even painted her toes. Then I decided to give her a gold belt chain because I thought it was cool and also a little queer, but I realized there's no belt loop at the back of her pants, so I had to wrap the chain around back to the front, and you can definitely see it hanging off of her butt if you look closely, so just don't. Finally, I found some pretty large gold jump rings from a craft store, and I slipped one on her arm to act as a bracelet. And the last step, as I had forgotten to do this earlier, I used some Elmer's glue all again to stick on some individual lashes, and we're done! I am so glad that this project is finally over, and I think she looks so cool. You ready for the montage? Despite all the jokes throughout, I truly do want to note that while having queer-coded and sexually ambiguous characters can be nice, it's also really nice to have confirmed gay and queer characters as well. I know this was meant to just be a goofy little repaint, but I did genuinely have a lot of fun once I started to make her queer. It was fun to try and slip little innuendos in here and there, and middle school me would probably freak out if she saw a gay little doll sitting on her desk. So thank you for taking the time to sit down and watch me obliterate this doll. And I do 100% intend on continuing this series as I have 5 more dolls waiting to be dismembered. But I think for the next diary entry, I want to do a full custom, the whole shebang. As much as I hate sewing, I do miss it in a sick and twisted Stockholm Syndrome sort of way, and I have been watching a certain D&D campaign that has a character in it I've really wanted to make into a doll, but I wanted to wait until the channel was up and running, and now I have no excuse. So come join me next time, if you want to hop into that dimension, wink. Again, thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. Until next month, that's all, diary. Oh, and the date. February 7th, 2023. Love, the Dollaries. See you next time.